Well, I'm blessed, quite truthfully, I would say, to be in a profession that is now predominantly women. In veterinary medicine, it's shifted dramatically, even from the time where I started over 25 years ago. The classroom, if you look at it today, is over 80% female compared to our human medicine caretakers. Veterinary medicine draws a lot of amazing women to the caregiving arena, nurses, doctors, front desk staff. Leadership is a place where we are slower to have a larger presence. And I think that's true in the world, but I am blessed currently to work alongside an amazing, an all female veterinary social worker team in my role. And we support our veterinary associates throughout our practices nationwide currently. So it's a chance to be in those spaces as well as to mentor in other ways outside of my work role. I mentor young veterinarians as well who happen to be female. I actually love the larger question, which is how do we support women to pursue their dreams and their intellectual curiosity and their desire to really have an impact, a positive impact in the world as they feel called to? And if that is through STEM and if that is through veterinary medicine, beautiful. But having the courage and the support of your family, your friends, like-minded souls, big sisters in the community to explore and really seek what is my role here? Who am I and how can bring my unique voice to the conversation? That's what I really hope is true, is that we really are supporting those passions from a very young age and not shutting them down by cultural conditioning or stigmas or biases. Instead, having the larger space where we create something called psychological safety. In many of these environments, that's lacking for women, especially STEM environments, where we feel encouraged to ask questions, encouraged to make mistakes, because that's where we grow. There is no failure. There's only an effort to try, and then there's a learning, and we move forward. So I want there to be a greater sense of upholding, of celebrating curiosity and creating psychological safety, particularly for women when it comes to STEM opportunities. I love that there has been a plethora of resources that are being developed in the form even of children's books, in the form of toys. And there's now a shift around that there is gender neutral conversation around from the time that you are forming your brain and you're developing curiosity about who am I again in the world. We're already starting that in many spaces. In the classroom, there's still work to do, but it's happening. There are spaces then as we go through our career, we know that historically it's around 7th to 8th grade, where many times young women shut themselves down for whatever reason. They tend to shut themselves down around STEM. That's the first place where I would love to see there be more peer and colleague and allyship, where women of all different sizes and packages and backgrounds are coming into the classrooms to speak to who am I and what am I doing in the STEM environment, encouraging. There are mentorship spaces that are being developed, particularly around women in STEM. Yes, having a conversation space and saying, well, she's doing it, maybe I could. So really highlighting that in media and in spaces that we bring in speakers and create mentoring in such a way where people feel safe, they feel supported, and they're curious and know that there could very well be something that they can say yes to, and it doesn't even have to exist yet. Maybe it's something that they figure out and see the opportunity and know that they could. Well, it's a societal conversation. It's a global conversation. I think that there's, not necessarily something that happens when somebody is born. I think you do come from certain genetic predispositions, and I think our conditioning in our households about who our parents are and their educational backgrounds, where are you growing up in the world, what is the role of these individuals in their communities. Yes, that all plays a role. But maybe we have inspirational conversations about how do we tap into this new paradigm around virtual, right? And so that maybe we can break down some of the barriers that happen with physical isolation, geographical isolation, and we connect like-minded communities to inspire people of all different backgrounds to come forward in ways that they might not have seen opportunities to do so in times past. This is the adaptation to what we can use technology for good and for us to make our global community's voice louder. And that also means women finding their voice, holding their voice, and holding each other up. And that's very important as well, is that there is enough for all. There is, I know historically it's true for men and for women, there's this competition around scarcity mindset. It's a story. It's a story. It is not true. There is enough for all of us to show up. And so I love the conversation around, let's move away from a scarcity mindset and away from ego, and perhaps think about what is for the greater good and what the potential would be for us to collaborate and co-create and be stronger. What positive impacts could we have on our communities and on the earth as a result? I mean, I guess the first one would be when I was 4. Marched up to my mother apparently with hands on hips and said, I am going to be an animal doctor, and just marched away. And she was like, well, and there was that. And there's actually, that's true for many individuals in the veterinary profession. They will say that they might have felt a calling to this profession when they were quite young. And I didn't back off. It was very clear to me that this was the space where I felt called to be, that I could make a difference. The work was hard. I did not love physics. I did not love calculus. I did not thrive in those environments. Loved organic chemistry, loved my microbiology. So there were some pieces and parts that really were more of my creative visual self, and there were parts that were more theoretical that I had a harder time with. But I powered on because it mattered, and it was just the stepping stones necessary to get to the what's next. So I think that that's the piece. The other time was when I was in college and I was struggling with those courses, thinking imposter syndrome showing up. Who am I? Am I smart enough to do this? This is really hard. Are other people in this field struggling with these things too? Yes, is the answer. So I've powered on. And each time I felt myself wondering, and it's happened multiple times, as it does to many individuals when they're in new environments, am I smart enough? Do I have the resiliency to do this? Do I have what it takes? And having that soul searching reflection of, do I still feel tethered to the purpose enough? Do I still have the passion for this? Does it matter enough to me to get through the gritty bits? And if the answer is yes, you move on and you just work with the discomfort and recognize, I love this so much, that it's when you feel discomfort, recognize you're growing again. And it's healthy. And I think that I look at fields that are not just necessarily in veterinary medicine, although I do feel like I'm surrounded by pioneers and groundbreakers of women in the field. There's women, particularly originally I had thought that I was going to be drawn towards conservation medicine and zoo, which historically is a very, and still largely is, a predominantly male dominated field. The women that have that inspired me, that were my mentors and that are still in the realm of impacting zoo medicine, wildlife medicine, conservation medicine, are just really pioneers in what is possible and believing in themselves and their capacity to show up, even though it wasn't necessarily the most welcoming space, because it was not. I chose to take my career in a bit of a different direction, quite truthfully, because I was influenced a bit by that patriarchal influence and how I saw it impacting my mentors. That was only a piece of why I chose to go into emergency medicine that did also have exotics, as opposed to going into zoo med. So it did influence me. So I am very honored, though, to see that those women are still there. They are still influencing. And then you have women that aren't veterinarians per se, but influence the larger conservation message, which, like Jane Goodall and Sylvia Earle, are my heroes. They just are phenomenal women, and they're still doing what they do, and they're still impacting. And I love that they have just, again, were starting in spaces that were predominantly men that were around them, and they felt so compelled to show up that it motivated them again and again, and they have stayed, and they are still actively speaking, writing, influencing, teaching. I find that just incredibly inspirational.